All right, so hello, Entrepreneurship 3012. Um, so I know this is going to be a challenging transition to an online format for the rest of the semester. I'm going to do my best to be reachable, to be flexible. Um, Please don't hesitate to reach out if something about the class is no longer working for you. If you're having trouble with our online slides, please let me know. I hope that all of you are well and safe. And, with that, let's transition back to some schoolwork. All right, so today's class 18, and we're talking about open innovation, and we're going to apply it to one of our, our main Louisiana industries, that being the energy industry. Before we jump in, I just want to get a couple of housekeeping things out of the way. So in the event that you haven't read the course slides yet, I've moved the exam back roughly 4 days. So now your exam date is on April 14th. Okay. The way I'm going to handle it is I'm going to deliver it via Moodle. And the exam is going to start at your class start period. Your exam will close 1 hour after the start of your class period. So make sure you're there, make sure you're ready to go, test out your internet connection. As a reminder, the content's not cumulative, so it's everything that we've gone over since your last exam. And I'm going to give the exam with the understanding that you can use open book, open notes. If you want, you can try and find answers on the web. I don't think it'll be particularly useful. But there's no collaboration. I expect that you won't reach out to your fellow students and ask about questions or answers. This is an integrity thing. It will probably have a similar format to last class, last exam for this class, albeit I may throw in a little bit more definition type stuff to make it a little bit easier. You also have a second deliverable, which was supposed to be our in-class term project. And we're going to have to be a little bit flexible on this as well. As a reminder, I've given you a cheat sheet already, and I've provided you exemplars that are on Moodle. What's different here is in your syllabus, I've given you 29 topics that we talked about throughout the semester. And essentially what I want you to do, quite similar to your weekly submissions, is to find news. Find news that relates to these topics. Now here's the key difference. When you're searching for news for the fantasy game, you've had the ability to find whatever news you want. Okay? In this case, you have to find 10 of the topics that are listed. Right? But to make this easier, there's no company restriction. Right? It doesn't have to be from your roster of 6 companies. It's anybody in the world. I just want you to find news that's talking about the content from our course. The one restriction is it has to be after November 2019. So roughly anything with the last 3 or 4 months is fair game. What we're going to do is we're going to do it via a Zoom group meeting where I will meet over the internet with your group, and you'll present to me via a shared meeting. Okay. Your job as a team is to find out what time and date works well for you, roughly an hour time slot. I've given you 2 whole weeks to figure out where your schedules mesh, but my expectation is you reach out to me, you tell me this is when we want to meet, and I will set up the meeting with you, contingent on that other groups haven't already requested that time. Now, to be clear what I'm looking for, this is again sticking with our emphasis on stripping away the fluff, right? Getting you prepared to deliver information in the way that your bosses are going to want to hear it, okay? So what do I want? I'm talking like 3 or 4 bullets tops. I want a description of the story, enough that demonstrates you know what you're talking about, and so that I, as the receiver of the information, understand what you're talking about. Then I want you to describe how the story relates to the topic that you're talking about. So this story is about X. X is defined as whatever. Here's an example why I think it applies. Okay, and then give me a link to your story. But I want clean slides, much like you're expected to provide in the real world. But I will give you an out, and your out is this. You're free to use the talking point area, the notes section of your PowerPoint. And that's where I want you to provide your notes that you're trying to reference off the top of your head. Okay, what's the point of this? The point of this is that if you misspeak, if you use an incorrect word, but I can see in your written notes you knew what you were talking about, you will get the benefit of the doubt. So while I don't require you to give me your notes section or fill out the notes section of the PowerPoint, it's probably in your best interest as a group to do so. Second item of fair warning is I told you in our first class, if you take the weekly submissions serious, if you put more emphasis on them throughout the semester, it's very possible that you could have already identified your 10 stories that you're going to talk to me about during your group presentation. And by no means is that not encouraged. If you've done it, and you've done it well, you should use those same stories. But I want to give you a fair warning. Just because I didn't talk to you in class about your story and highlight that I thought you were using the content incorrectly does not mean that you did use it correctly. All right. So make sure if you're going to reuse stories, go back and say, now that I've gone through the semester and I understand the topic or the content a little bit better, did I really use it correctly there? And then your third item that you have to be cognizant of is that if you do a story on joint ventures, acquisitions, crowdsourcing, or corporate venture capital, and you give me a story about that, you must, on your slide, do today's exercise that we're going to go through. Meaning that I don't want a story that says, IBM just did an acquisition of small startup company from Baton Rouge, therefore it's a story of an acquisition. What you will have to do is talk to me about the project attributes of the project that the Baton Rouge company is doing, what it has to do with IBM, and how those specific attributes would have led you to believe that this structure, as opposed to another one, was selected. Okay. That word of advice will mean a lot more once we dive into today's content. So let's do so. Okay, so it seems like a long time ago, but roughly 2 weeks ago, we were in class. And I was giving you a discussion of different types of structures and how they had certain benefits and trade-offs to them. Okay. And how some of them, given these trade-offs, were better for achieving some sort or degree of outcome relative to other ones you could select. However, in the real world, when you're the decision makers, you start with the project. You start with an idea. And then what you need to do and what your value is to the company is knowing how do I identify which structure I should adopt. Given that I have this project, this idea, this type of collaboration that I think is worthwhile to pursue, how should I go about deciding how do I decide between an alliance or a corporate venture capital investment or just doing it myself? This is the meat of how or why you will provide value to companies. Companies that aren't used to doing open innovation, aren't used to making these decisions, aren't skilled in doing this assessment. So that's what today is all about. In essence, I'm looking at this collaboration opportunity. How do I make the decision? Which way to structure it? So, what should we be thinking about? There's only 4 things, key project considerations that I want you to think about. First is this idea of uncertainty. Now, understand that uncertainty is a range. There's nothing in the world that is certain. But you have varying degrees of uncertainty that you're going to face as decision makers. Some of the uncertainty could deal with the market. How big is it? How profitable is it? How fast is it growing? Okay. When I'm an oil company, I can have a pretty good idea what the demand globally for oil is going to be next year. I have a pretty good idea what that demand is going to be in 5 years. When I compare that to something like, what is the demand for ethanol? Let's say algae ethanol. How big is that market? I don't know. I know today it's maybe a $10 million market. In 5 years, it could be 20 million. In 5 years, it could be $1 billion. Huge range in potential market size and potential market profitability. You can also think of uncertainty from the partner standpoint. I know today that we're talking about collaborating. How comfortable do I feel that you will be around in a year? How comfortable do I feel that you will be around in 5 years? If I'm ExxonMobil and I'm thinking about collaborating with British Petroleum, BP, I can feel pretty comfortable that they will exist in 2021. I'll feel pretty comfortable they'll exist in 2025 or 2030. But when you compare that to thinking about Joe's energy startup out of Baton Rouge that's only existed for a year, how comfortable are you that Joe's energy company will exist in a year, will exist in 5 years? I think we'd agree, without you knowing anything about my startup company, that British Petroleum involves a lot less uncertainty about their future and whether they will be around or not. So as a result, when you're identifying potential projects and potential collaborators to work with, you got to think about who they are and how uncertain you are about will they be around? What can they deliver? Right? If Joe's startup says I can do something, how much faith do you have in that? If British Petroleum says they can do something and they have a history of doing it over time, clearly they're less risky. There's less uncertainty about can they deliver on their collaboration promises. And then finally, there's technology. Okay, if somebody's bringing technology that you've seen before, that's already been developed, that's been in the marketplace for years and years and years, you don't have much concern about it, right? If somebody comes to you and says, I want to start a collaboration and we're going to use automobiles, great. I know that technology will work. But the moment somebody comes to you and says, I want to do this project and we're going to use flying unmanned drones, a technology that hasn't quite been worked out yet, now there's a little bit of uncertainty about this may be a good opportunity, but can the technology work? So when you are entering the project, you pause and you think about the market, you think about the potential partner, and you think about the potential technology. And then you got to ask yourself, how much uncertainty did each of these things involve? The next thing we've seen before, this idea of operational relatedness. Okay, you could ask, do I even need a partner? I mean, if I can do this already and I do this better than anybody else, do I really want a partner? Operational relatedness also tells you who you should pick as a partner. Normally, you're going to collaborate with somebody that can do something that you can't. So operational relatedness tell you, or is something you says about, this collaborator is coming and saying, we should do this together and here's what I can do. You want to ask yourself, do they have much experience doing that? Or likewise, how much experience do I have doing that? How should we really allocate these tasks? Third thing we'll think about, we started teasing out last class, is this idea of how much creativity is involved in this innovation project. Is the problem or solution well defined? Some projects don't require much new creativity at all. You know what the problem is, you know how you're going to solve it, and you want to move forward. But other times the problem's kind of abstract. It's out there, you have a general idea of what you're trying to accomplish. Let's say non-fossil fuels. We want to get towards a non-fossil fuel future. Okay, but how do we do that? I don't know. We haven't figured that out yet. But we're going to need to have a lot of creativity to get to a solution that gets us to that endpoint. So the third thing we're thinking about is the creativity. If the problem, some projects have problems and solutions that are well-defined. Other projects have problems and solutions that are not well-defined at all. And then there's a range of projects in between them. Okay? But these are things that are going to drive your decision in terms of how we structure the collaboration. Finally, this is where many students struggle. And I'll do my best to get at these aspects. The first one is codifiability. Codifiability, said straightforward, is can I write it down? Okay. Now this alludes to last class when we were talking about, one of the main limitations to those, classic collaborations is they rely on contracts. They rely on can you write it down? And oftentimes, when there's not a lot of uncertainty, you can write things down easily. But when you don't know what the future is going to be, it's tough to write down what each party in the relationship is going to actually do in order to accomplish your objective. And the second thing is observability. I know that I'm working with you, but how do I know that you're not taking advantage of me? How do I know if you're doing your fair share? How do I know if you're doing a good job? Now, I think all of us have been in the situation where we've had to write a report for class. And you had one report where you sat down in one of your classes, just started typing, and it just flowed. It was magical. Maybe you worked on it for 45 minutes, maybe you worked on it in an hour, but in the end, you didn't have to put much effort into it, and your teacher sees this project, and it's beautiful. It's a Picasso. And you get your A. Other times, in other classes, you sat down trying to write a report, and you wrote, and you deleted, and you had writer's block, and you had trouble with the content, and you worked hours and hours and days at trying to get a report together. And in the end, you probably didn't turn to something you were very happy about. And your teacher saw it and said, that's not very good. But here's the problem. Which one of these two projects did you actually work harder on? Which one did you actually put more effort into? I think we'd agree it's really that one that we struggled with. And that tends to be the problem with creative endeavors. Actual output and the ability to observe the amount of efforts your partner put into it is really difficult. If we collaborate and I ask you to make me widgets or nuts and bolts, I can walk into your place and see, are you making bolts? I can see how many you're making a day. I can see their quality. But if instead I ask you to paint me a mural for my wall, or I ask you to write me a line of code or a program, it may take you a day to make sure 3 lines of code work together. But me as an outsider coming in would say, well, you didn't do anything. You wrote 3 lines of code. But it doesn't mean you didn't work hard on it. And that becomes part of the problem, especially as we get to these more creative ideas, abstract problems and abstract solutions. It's really tough to observe whether your party is actually doing their fair share. So let's talk about some key relationships and the intuition behind them. Not surprisingly, when there's a high degree of uncertainty, there's a lot of risk involved. You as a decision maker want to adopt structures that maximize your flexibility, maximize your ability to get out of it if it's not working, and minimize the cost to start experimenting in that idea. So one of the ones we talked about last class was this idea, if I'm going into a brand new market and I'm an energy company and I want to figure out a way to make algae ethanol, I could spend all that money myself on my own internal R&D, or I could spend $1 million by giving 10 companies $100,000, 10 startup companies, and see what they do. Or I could give $1 million to just one of them. The odds are the one that you choose isn't going to work out. But if you can spread your risk across the 10 of them, it's likely that at least one of them, or the probability of at least one of them having an idea that's actually worthwhile, increases. Second thing we also alluded to last class as well, when there's high creativity required to either identify what the problem is that you're trying to address or how you address it, the solution you're going to propose, you want to have minimal controls or pre-specifications. Okay, there's no point in not knowing exactly how you're going to accomplish a problem by telling people exactly what to do. If I as a company don't know how we're going to solve a problem, I probably shouldn't control the process of experimenting with different ideas about how to address it. So when there's high creativity, you want to back off your control as an individual company, as well as how much stuff you write down and pigeonhole people into having to do. When we talk about that last attribute of low codifiability or low observability, meaning I can't really write down what needs to be done, and it's really difficult for me as a collaborator to see if you're doing your fair share, that's when we tend to see a lot of those open-ended relationships. Let's kind of start collaborating and see what happens. Or the use of equity. Look, we're both going to be owners in this, and that's how we're going to align our incentives. You could slack, but it's going to hurt you just as much as it hurts me. So I'm going to make our incentives aligned by sharing equity, either via a joint venture or maybe a corporate venture capital relationship. And then finally, when we think about operational relatedness, the intuition's right there. If I am already really good at doing something or have a lot of experience doing something, I should probably control a lot of it. And I'm also probably comfortable with spending a lot of money on it. I don't mind putting a lot of money into a certain project that I am intimately aware of, that industry or that technology or that opportunity, because I can calculate a return on investment and I feel comfortable with my ability to do such. So when we have at the bottom, I've just provided a pretty basic mapping of how certain ways of either collaborating or more broadly pursuing new ideas fall along our new project attributes. So when I want, or when I end up doing internal development, meaning I just do it all by myself, I have the highest control because I'm the only one that's participating. I own everything. But because I'm doing everything, the cost is actually the highest too. Because I'm doing it all with my own people, with my own structures, with my own processes, my ability to get out of it easily is low. It's the lowest because I'm creating jobs and roles and experiments to make something happen. And then finally, this idea of getting new ideas infused, the actual new creativity that you're trying to do by collaborating, well, it's going to be the lowest. Because the only creativity that's going to happen is the creativity I was only going to come up with on my own. If we go to the complete other end now, incubators and accelerators, remember those are the relationships where the company, I gave you Budweiser as the example, where they just have people that are somewhat related to beverages come and use their space. use their machines. No strings attached other than Budweiser gets to see what you're doing, how you're thinking about possibly making a play into the beverage industry. Well, in that case, because I can only observe as Budweiser, I have the least amount of control. But I'm not really spending any much money. I'm letting you use warehouse space or machinery that I've already bought. So there's no real cost to me. But if somebody does an idea and you think it's stupid, who cares? I can get out of that no problem. I just choose not to pursue it in any given way. I choose to pursue to not pursue it. I say, okay, your time's over in my accelerator or my incubator. Bye. Go on your merry way. But because I'm bringing people in with no strings attached, minimal restrictions on what you're doing, how you're going to do it, how you're thinking about the problem, how you're thinking about a solution, that's where we get the most creativity. All right, so I gave you the example of somebody coming up with a beer label that measures your blood alcohol limit. Great idea. But that happens, things like that happen because you're not restricting them. Your simple thing is, if you have something to do with the beer industry, come on in, and then we'll see what happens, right? These little trinkets of ideas that nobody's ever thought of, but after the fact, you're, wow, it's a good idea. Why didn't I think of that? That's where these nuggets start coming through. So, what was today's exercise about? Look, we're in Louisiana. We happen to have a not particularly well diversified industry or economy. And unfortunately, it's an industry, meaning energy, where disruption's coming. We see it coming. We see people, using less electricity, less energy, being more energy conscious. We see them looking for, or wanting to be green, looking for alternative fuel sources. We have people thinking about transportation differently, thinking about home energy differently. So there's a lot that's going on in their external environment. So they're not dumb. Top management teams at Exxon and Chevron and BP, if we know about it in class and we're talking about it, you know that they're talking about it. So today's exercise is ask the question, where are they allocating resources? And that's really what I'm pressing y'all to do today, is to think about that. And I've assigned 4 projects. And what we're going to do is go over the projects that I assigned you. And I want you as a team, or now that you're individually at home, maybe you'll have to do it by yourself, is to think about how would you put each of those projects, where would you put it on the spectrum of the uncertainty involved, operational relatedness, the creativity required, and the codifiability or observability of the actual activities. And can we predict, given these structure or these attributes of the project, which structure was ultimately adopted? We shall see. But first, let's go through 3 examples together. First one is British Petroleum and Prudhoe Bay. So Prudhoe Bay, for those of you that don't know, right on the very, very tip of Alaska. It's essentially the frontier of Alaska, where all the Arctic, sea drilling is really based out of. Okay. So what's the context? What is happening in the external environment that makes companies decide, now there's an opportunity here? This is pretty straightforward. Number 1, climate change is happening. We tend to think about that as a problem. But for oil companies, suddenly things that used to be buried under snow and ice and glaciers that made it prohibitively expensive to get to, now they can suddenly reach some of those oil fields. Second, we have a presidential cabinet, or we have a presidency that's decided that we need to scale back a lot of regulations. scale back on a lot of Obama era environmental protections, and as a result are opening up ability to drill in certain areas that previously were prohibitively expensive to do so. And then finally, as much as we think about oil demand slipping, maybe that's true in America as we adopt our hybrid cars, as we put solar panels on our house. But once you get out of this America and European-centric mindset and you look at the raw data, oil demand and gasoline demand is on the steady rise, okay? Specifically because of developing nations that now need these energies. So what is this confluence of activities? What is the actual business opportunity here? There's oil that previously was too expensive to get to, that now we can get to. Regulations have changed that give us access to it. And we feel comfortable in the future that oil demand is just going to increase. So, Prudhoe Bay. So, you're BP and you think about these questions. Okay, I have to drill an oil platform in Prudhoe Bay. Let's jump to our second element. Operational relatedness. Is this related to what I'm already doing? I'll give you a hint. All of the red dots you see there on their screen, or well, black dots circled with a big black circle, that's where BP already has operations. And where are these Prudhoe Bay platforms? About 50 miles more offshore. So as a result, literally 50 miles south of where this business opportunity is, you're already doing it. So you already have people there that know how to do it. You already have equipment there. You already have infrastructure in place to get supplies in and get oil out. So you're already doing it. So it has a high degree of operational relatedness to BP's existing operations. Think about uncertainty. How much uncertainty is there really about how much oil demand will exist next year? 5 years, 10 years, okay? Because we're talking about big projects with long-term payoffs. It may go up 2%, it may go down 5%, may go up 10%. But in terms of a range, if over the next 5 years you could predict within 10% exactly how much oil you should be pumping out of there and how valuable it will be, I would love that type of bet with 90% accuracy about what the world will be like in 5 years. So as a result, there's not much uncertainty at all, very low uncertainty. In terms of technology, they already have platforms that drill in water. They already have piping or tubing or whatever that gets the oil out of the ground. They already have ships that take the oil down to a refinery. So everything they need, they don't need to newly develop. They just take the existing solutions of how we drill and we put it in a new area. So now we have very low market uncertainty and very low technology uncertainty. Because it's something I already do really well, I probably won't want to partner with anybody. So I don't have to worry about partner uncertainty in this context. Because we can use our existing solutions, our existing platforms, our existing people, our existing tubes, our existing barges, there's no new creativity. I'm taking everything I'm already doing and just putting it somewhere different. So no creativity is required here. Could I write down where I want you to put the next platform? I already have schematics on how we build platforms. I could write down where you're going to do it, what longitude, what latitude. I could check, I could observe whether you're doing it by seeing how much has been built of that platform. I could observe how much oil is coming out if once you start pumping. So it has a high degree of codifiability and observability. Again, because we already know how to do it. We already know what to look for. We already know what to measure. Now, not surprisingly, when we go back to these relationships that help us drive decision making, well, if I don't need high creativity, I don't mind being inflexible. If I should control something that I'm the best at, If I'm okay at a high cost because there's not much uncertainty, BP is developing these things all internally. There's a market opportunity, but in this case, we are going to pursue it on our own moving forward. Option 2, BP again. BP and BISN. Now again, what is the context? What is making BP decide this is an opportunity I need to pursue? Well, close to our hearts, we have the Deep Horizon oil spill. Poor existing solutions. The moment the actual leak started happening, we didn't have a way to seal it. So existing solutions that were out there either didn't exist or were definitely inadequate. We have a shoreline to prove it. We have people not being able to fish to prove it, that these solutions were not sufficient. And then BP faced unprecedented fines. The world changed for them when it became clear when you screw up and you have leaks and you can't fix it, you will be held responsible, and it will really hurt your bottom line. So what I'd like you to do, pause my video and go to the Vimeo link. Okay, I can't do it here for y'all because I don't think you'll be able to pick up on the sound very well. But pause it, watch the video, and then come back. Okay. So if you did that, what you'll find is BISN has a rather novel solution to how we actually get the plug into the tube that's leaking. Without overcomplicating it, they put some molten metal down the tube, they do something and it hardens, and now the tube is sealed. Great idea. Great potential business opportunity. But you're now at BP. Let's go through decision making. First, now we'll start with uncertainty. How big is the market for these safety elements? How big will it be in 5 years, 10 years? You don't really have data points because those solutions don't exist yet. You don't know how valuable it will be to people. You don't know how many people will buy it. Is this only a thing that's required in American areas or American shorelines, and maybe other parts of the world wouldn't require them? You don't know. They don't know. It's uncertain. This BISN company, how uncertain are we about them as a company? Well, they've been around for less than 5 years. They only have 2 facilities. They're really excited about this other one that's maybe 20, or I think it was 50,000 square feet. Big, but not big when you're talking BP level. Can they do what they say they can do? What track record do they have? They have an idea, but they don't know if they can deliver, or you don't know if they can deliver on their promises. And then finally, technology. They have this technology that's working in the lab. Does it work at 30,000 feet under the ocean? We don't know yet. One of the problems when you have these new technologies is you can make them work in theory. But anybody that's ever been in the real world knows the moment you get into the real world, there's a lot of things that come up that make it not work anymore. And that's part of the problem. BISN's technology is a novel solution to a pretty well-established problem, but you don't know for sure will it work. If you don't know how it's going to work, they may get out in the ocean, they may try it, and they may have to start tweaking things. They may have to continually develop their idea to actually make it work in the real world. And that's where the creativity comes in. I think I have a solution, but how I'm actually going to make that work, that's still yet to be seen. As a result, this project has a high degree of uncertainty. a high degree of creativity required. We haven't gotten it to the point where it works. So as a result, the creativity that gets from idea to actually working still needs to be accomplished. Finally, codifiability. What would you write down if you were a BP, if you were writing down a contract? You'll plug my pipes. At what depth? How big of pipes? For how long? How quickly? At what cost? We don't know any of these answers yet because the technology doesn't work yet. And when you try and go in and you observe, are they actually doing, how much progress are they making? What would you look at? If you look at an experiment, you see a bunch of scientists sitting around waiting for some experiment to finish. Are they doing a good job or not? It's tough to tell. So it's not a situation where you could easily observe whether your collaborator is doing what they said they would. So as a result, it's not something BP does. They shouldn't control it. Somebody that actually understands the technology should control it. But because it's an unproven technology, I don't want to spend a lot of money. There are many, many potential solutions. And I assure you there are many solutions that BP is investing in on how to plug a leaky pipe. So I don't want to devote all of my money or even a substantial amount of my pot of money to this one solution. I want to spread it across a number of solutions. So I want to minimize my costs and maximize my potential options. I want to be able to get out of it. If BISN's technology doesn't work, I want to be able to walk away and move on to a relationship where they have a technology that's a little bit more promising, works in the real world. And then finally, I want to adopt a structure that's not going to contain creativity, but it's going to promote it. It's going to allow that working things out on the fly to actually flourish and be successful. So as you look at our potential options across the bottom, where do we see BP giving up a lot of control, minimizing or at least decreasing their overall cost, having a high degree of flexibility, and making sure they maximize the creativity that's going into the process? Here we go. And that's exactly what we saw. Your last 5 or 6 seconds of that video is showing you all the different people that are investing in this technology. Noteworthy, it's 3 different oil companies. They're all taking a slight stake to see what happens because they're interested. They've got a little bit of traction, but they're not sure will it work in the real world. Now, the last one we'll talk about is this: Shell and the Eco Marathon. What is the Eco Marathon? These people I have a picture of, well, first we'll start with the context. Whereas demand for oil and gas is increasing, we do face the reality as energy companies that oil reserves are diminishing. We are taking them out faster than they will replace themselves. We have some consumers that are now eco-conscious, that don't want gas guzzling vehicles. And if you look at our trajectory of miles per hour, or miles per gallon, excuse me, I should say MPG, stagnated miles per gallon, the actual efficiency of our cars, most of our cars have plateaued somewhere between 25 and 35 miles per hour, miles per gallon. And they've stayed there for going on close to 15 years. So the Eco Marathon is something that Shell promotes. These individuals on the screen are actually here at LSU. They're senior design engineers. This is their senior project. What the Eco Marathon does is it sponsors students, engineering students at LSU, MIT, Caltech, UT Austin. And essentially, they put a very broad question up there. How would you maximize miles per gallon? How would you rethink transportation in order to make us have better use of our energy? So, from an operational relatedness, Does Shell make cars? Does Shell have employees that build transportation devices or transportation options? No, it's not what they do. So there's very low operational relatedness for Shell. In terms of uncertainty, if you're throwing it out there and you're saying, come up with an idea, how do you know how big that market is? How do you know how profitable it is? Huge variance in terms of, if you came up with a car that looks like this thing on your bottom screen, how many people would buy that? How many people would use that to get to work? I don't know. Very difficult to predict. High degree of uncertainty. Because technologies are being created by seniors for the first time in engineering classes, these partners are very uncertain. You don't know. You may invest in two of the teams at LSU may be awesome. Two may flounder. They had an idea, but it didn't work out. And maybe two don't take it serious. Great deal of uncertainty in terms of who your partners at the school are going to be, their quality, and their technology. Will it work or not? But importantly, what they want here is they want to maximize creativity. The broad thing is, how would you maximize miles per gallon? That is it. That is literally what is written down. The competition is who can get a vehicle to go the farthest on 1 gallon of gasoline. That's it. So you want to put situations in place where the creativity is maximized. Our problem is only abstract in the sense that get something to go far on a gallon of gas. But your solution, I don't want to define that at all. I want to see what you, as seniors in engineering classes, come up with. As a result, I can't write that down. And I also can't observe very well how much progress you're getting on it. If you looked in on these teams in their group meetings, they're huddled around a table, talking, throwing ideas, saying why this won't work, why that won't work. They may get to the end of that meeting. They may have 5 meetings in a week and get to the end of the week and have nothing to show for it. But it doesn't mean they didn't do a lot of work. So as a result, this is a situation where there's low codifiability and low observability. And what do we see them doing? In essence, this is an accelerator incubator program. We're going to promote people. We're going to give them money. They don't owe us anything. We just want to see, what will you come up with? How would you attack this broad problem? So what we've gone through now is 3 different things the oil industry is investing in. And I hope now you see, once we logically go through what the project is about, what it's trying to accomplish, and how it relates to things like uncertainty, operational relatedness, codifiability, and how much creativity is still left to accomplish, you generally understand why these structures that have been adopted do make a lot of sense from an intuitive perspective. And this example here doesn't make sense for BP to control things and tell people how to accomplish whatever, because then you're really going to strangle the creativity. They don't want that. But they also don't want to give millions of dollars to every, senior team at LSU. They give them a little bit of money and see what they do with it. So I'll stop here for your first video before we transition to the next part of the class.